Hello everyone, today we're going to work on IXL CMX, solve two-step equations without parentheses. So quick reminder, an example here on the screen, when we're solving equations, our whole goal is to isolate the variable. We want to isolate the variable, another way of saying we want to get that variable all by itself. So if we look at the very bottom here, the reason we want to get that variable all by itself is because then that will tell us what it's equal to. That will give us its value for that particular equation. When we're working on solving equations and isolating that variable, we have to use inverse operations. So inverse is another word for opposite. So basically we're undoing what's happening to that x in order for us to isolate it and get it alone. So we can see here originally we had 3x plus 5. The inverse of addition is subtraction. And then after we perform that, we have 3x, another way of saying 3 times x. Well, the inverse, the opposite of multiplication, is division. And then the beautiful thing with equations is you can always plug it back in. We can substitute -7 in for x into the original equation, and that will allow us to double check our work. All right, now let's hop on over to IXL so you can see a few examples actually worked out step by step. All right, here we are on IXL. Reminder, the assignment is CMX, solve two-step equations without parentheses. So in this first problem, we're being asked to solve for h. I'm actually going to rewrite it off to the side here so we can have plenty of room to work. One thing I like to do in solving equations, and it helps me more when the equations are bigger, but I still honestly even do it with the two-step equations as well, is I draw a line through that equal sign. It kind of helps me separate the two sides so I can remember where my two sides are. So whatever I do to one side, I can do to the other to keep it equal, to keep it balanced. So our goal is to get this h by itself. So we're continuing with that theme of inverse operations, and we're going to even be doing inverse order of operations. So that means we're going to start from the bottom up and deal with any addition or subtraction first, then the multiplication or division. So I can see that this 3 is being added to the 2h. The inverse of addition is subtraction. And whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So 3 minus 3 is 0, which means we're just left with a 2h. And then 7 minus 3 is 4. Now for our next step, I'm a little bit closer to getting h by itself. I just have that 2 in the way. Well, that 2 is being multiplied by the h. And I know that because when a number and a variable are side by side like that, it means multiplication. So the inverse of multiplication is division. We will divide both sides by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So we're just left with one single h. And then 4 divided by 2 is 2. All right, since this is our first one, I will go ahead and substitute this back in just to show you how you can check your work, but I won't be doing this on every problem. So if we take our original problem and rewrite it, I'm going to come off to the side here, 3 plus 2h equals 7. We have discovered that in order for this equation to be true, we just said the value of h is equal to the number 2. So I'm going to substitute the number 2 in for h. So we would have 3 plus 2 times 2 instead of 2 times h. And that should equal 7. Well, 2 times 2 is 4. That gives us 3 plus 4 equals 7. And 3 plus 4 is, in fact, 7. So that right there is an example of how you can check your work on any of the equations. If you ever feel like your answer's a little off, you can see whether or not it works. And for this IXL, you can notice that they already put the h equals there, so all you have to do is just type in the 2 for it to mark it as correct. All right, next problem here, we want to solve for y. We have y over 4 plus -5 equals -2. So as you can see, as you get a little higher in the SMART score, so my SMART score is up into the 40s, you are going to start seeing some integers, some positive and negative numbers in there. So the only thing that really means is you just need to be a bit more careful. because sometimes the negatives can trip us up. But if you're still struggling with that, you always have permission to use that calculator to double check that you did your negatives addition or subtraction correctly. So when we solve this equation, we are trying to get y by itself, and I need to deal with any addition or subtraction first. And I see that I'm adding a -5. So I'm adding, but I'm adding a -5. If we're trying to undo this, that means we're trying to get it to equal 0. We're trying to get it to disappear. And in math, when something disappears, it equals 0 from the left and move it on over to the right. So because of that, since it's a -5, the inverse, the opposite of a -5, would be a +5. And a +5 is the same thing as a +5. Addition, positive, interchangeable in this case. So I'm going to actually erase this underline right here because that makes it look like division. And a great way we can double check to make sure that really worked is what is -5 plus 5? If it equals 0, then we did the right thing because it's now disappeared from the left and we're moving it over to the right. And if you double check that in your calculator, you will see that it is in fact 0. So that means we can add that +5 over to the right as well. So because this equals 0, we're just left with y over 4. And then -2 plus 5. Once again, be careful. Try it in your head first. Double check it in a calculator. -2 plus 5 would be 3. If you are a visual person and you visualize a number line in your head, or maybe you draw one out, if you're starting at -2 on the number line and we're adding 5, because you're adding, you're going to the right. You're going towards those positive numbers. All right, now what does this y over 4 mean? Because it looks like a fraction. Well, it is a fraction, but remember that another way that, or another meaning for fractions is they mean division. It's just usually with fractions, it's still written as a fraction because its value is less than a whole, or part of its value is less than a whole. So that's why it's written as a fraction. In this case, we have y over 4, another way of saying y divided by 4. And the inverse of division is multiplication. So we can multiply both sides by 4. And when we do that, that simplifies out to be 1, leaving us with just one single y. And then 3 times 4 is 12. And that would be our answer. All done because we figured out what y is. It's isolated and it's by itself. All right, we'll try about 2 more problems here. So now we're being asked to solve for m. 17 equals 3m plus 2. With this one, you may notice it's written backwards, where the variable is on the other side. That honestly doesn't matter. It's not as common and not as familiar for us to see the variable on the other side initially, but that's okay. Everything, our steps are still exactly the same. So we're trying to isolate that m, get our m by itself. So we got to get rid of any addition or subtraction first. Then we can deal with our multiplication or division. I see that I have a +2 right here. The inverse of adding a +2 would be subtracting. We'll subtract 2 on both sides. 17 minus 2 is 15. Bring down your equal sign. Bring down your 3m. And 2 minus 2 is 0. So it disappeared from that side just like we wanted. All right, now we have 3m, which means 3 times m. So the inverse of multiplication is division. We'll divide both sides by 3. 15 divided by 3 is 5. 3 divided by 3 is 1. So we're just left with one single m. 5 is equal to m. Or you could flip that around, which is what they have up top here, and just make it m equals 5 because it's equals. Either way that you write it is equivalent. They both have that same value. All right, well, let this be our last one here. We have another one with a fraction, or as we just know, it's division, and then we have a negative involved too. So kind of nice, we can get another example like that. So s over 3 plus 3 equals negative 1. All right, first thing we need to do is deal with any addition or subtraction, and I see that I have a plus 3, so the inverse of that would be minus 3. So we're going to subtract that from both sides. 3 minus 3 is 0, so we're just left with s over 3. And now once again, if these negatives and subtraction signs, are still a little uncomfortable for you, try it on your own first, because that's the only way we get better is practice, but then double check in a calculator, because you can put into your calculator -1 minus 3, and it will double check your work for you. I'm going to write this off to the side. So if we have -1 minus 3, I know that some of us, whenever we see a subtraction sign along with negatives, we like to use keep, change, change. We like to rewrite it to be adding the opposite, so otherwise known as -1 plus -3, giving us that -4. If you like to use number lines, whether you draw your own or you just visualize it in your head, if you have a -1 that you're starting at and you're subtracting 3, that means you're going to the left. So you're going deeper into those negatives. All right, now if we come back to our original problem here, we are left with s divided by 3 equals -4. Well, the inverse of that fraction, the inverse of that division there would be multiplication. So we'll multiply both sides by 3. And then that ends up simplifying and reducing to be 1, giving us s equals -4 times 3. Remember, when you're multiplying and dividing, your integer rules are if the signs are the same, the answer is positive. If the signs are different, it's negative. That would give us a -12. And just like I said before, if you're a little nervous that you're going to get your signs wrong, just quickly put it in the calculator, -4 times 3, and double check your own work. See if you did it correct. And that would be your final answer, -12. All right, before we sign off, just got to give a quick little reminder to check out IXL's resources. They have an awesome video right here that they've made. So if you need to see a few more examples or just hear it from a different perspective, please check out their video. And of course, as you're working on stuff, if you ever miss a question, it shows you step by step how to correctly solve it. So be sure to read through that so you can discover your mistake and learn from it to do better on the next one. All right, good luck on this assignment. If you need anything, please reach out to your teacher. Bye.